heart of one of America's most close-knit immigrant communities, a man stood at the altar of faith, love, and devotion to thousands of people who trusted him with their very souls. To the thousands, it felt more than a religious station, protector. He was far more than a protector, a living symbol of hope in a foreign land.
Born into the ancient Chaldean Catholic faith, David was ordained as a Catholic priest in Detroit, Michigan in 1984, becoming part of one of the oldest and most sacred Christian traditions on the face of the earth.
The Kawaja Kaisani is in ancient Mesopotamia, the land that is now modern-day Iraq, where Or's fall language Jesus Christ himself once spoke. In 2017, Pope Francis personally appointed him to lead the Eparchy of St. Peter the Apostolic across the entire western half of the United States.
What they could not have known, what none of them could have imagined, was that the man they were celebrating was allegedly about to betray every single one of them. This is the story of Bishop David's fall from grace.
It is a community forged in fire, tracing their ancestry to the ancient plains of Nineveh and the historic city of Mosul.
When ISIS swept across northern Iraq in 2014 and 2015, these communities were among the hardest hit. Churches were burned, priests were murdered, entire villages emptied almost overnight. Hundreds of thousands of Chaldean Christians were forced to flee. These were not wealthy immigrants. These were survivors who arrived in America with little more than their faith, their family, and the fierce determination to rebuild. At the absolute center of all of it was the church. It was where they held their cultural events, their holiday celebrations, their community fundraisers, and where newly arrived refugees came first, looking for help and belonging.
St. Peter's Cathedral was not merely a building. It was the beating heart of the community, where every Sunday they gathered to hear prayers in their ancient Aramaic language.
Stealing it from them is almost impossible to comprehend. And yet, according to prosecutors, that is precisely what Bishop David allegedly did, week after week, for years.
Every great fraud begins with a single small decision, a moment when someone in a position of absolute trust reaches into the till for the first time and quietly hopes that no one will ever notice. At the center of the scheme was the church social hall, rented out monthly to an outside management company. Under any legitimate arrangement, those payments would flow directly into the church's official accounts. Prosecutors allege David instructed it in, third to him that rectal income, pipili thalvo financing the churches, month after month, envelope after envelope. Over the course of the scheme, prosecutors allege a total of $272,000 in church funds were funneled directly to Bishop David personally. Years of alleged systematic theft from an institution that depended on every single dollar. To cover his tracks, prosecutors allege David used funds from a separate account designated specifically for helping the poor and most vulnerable members of the congregation to make the financial books appear balanced. First stealing from the congregation, then stealing from the poor to hide the crime. The sheer audacity of this alleged double betrayal has left legal experts, community members, and fellow clergy almost speechless with disbelief. Financial crimes within religious institutions rarely come to light through dramatic confessions. They are discovered slowly, carefully, through the patient and meticulous work of those who learn to spot the subtle signs that something is deeply wrong. Certain individuals within the eparchy began to notice unusual patterns in the handling of rental income. Payments that should have appeared in official records were not showing up. Revenues were disappearing without explanation. The concerns were brought to external law enforcement. The San Diego County District Attorney's Office launched a formal criminal investigation, assigning investigators to conduct a detailed forensic examination of the church's financial records going back several years. What investigators allegedly found was not accounting errors or innocent mismanagement. It was, according to prosecutors, a systematic and deliberate pattern of theft, carefully concealed and maintained over years. Investigators conducted interviews with witnesses who had direct knowledge of the financial operations of the eparchy, tracing the movement of money in and out of various accounts, reconstructing a detailed picture that allegedly told a clear and damning story. And then investigators received a piece of intelligence that would transform this financial investigation into something far more dramatic. Information suggesting that Bishop David was making plans to leave the United States permanently.
March 5th, 2026, San Diego International Airport, a scene that feels almost too cinematic to be real, and yet every detail of it is documented in court records. When he appeared at the terminal, he was not dressed in the clerical robes his congregation knew. He wore plain civilian clothing, as though he had already shed the identity of the man his community had known and trusted. Law enforcement had coordinated with airport security and federal authorities. Acting quickly and decisively, officers were positioned and waiting. When the moment came, they moved. Officers searched his belongings. What they found inside his luggage stopped investigators in their tracks. Approximately $9,000 in cash, a mixture of US dollars and European euros, discovered hidden within his bags. $9,000. Just below the $10,000 threshold requiring international travelers to declare their cash. To investigators, this was not a coincidence.
Within hours, photographs and reports of the bishop's arrest were circulating across social media platforms, appearing in news feeds from San Diego to Sydney to the Catholic community around the world. It was the moment that confirmed their worst fears. Following his arrest, Bishop David was formally charged by the San Diego County District Attorney's Office with a total of 17 felony counts, a list so extensive and serious it left even experienced legal observers taken aback.
8 counts of embezzlement, 8 counts of money laundering, 1 count of aggravated white-collar crime, 3 categories of alleged criminal conduct, each one carrying its own devastating legal weight.
These 17 felony counts represent one of the most serious criminal cases ever brought against a sitting Catholic bishop in the United States. Prosecutors view this not as impulsive misconduct, but as a carefully planned and sustained criminal enterprise. If convicted on all counts, Bishop David faces a maximum sentence of approximately 15 years in a California state prison, a remarkable and devastating outcome for a man who once held one of the most honored positions in his religious community. Legal analysts who have reviewed the case have assessed the prosecution's position as strong, noting the alleged paper trail of cash payments and the damning circumstances of the airport arrest as the 2 pillars of a formidable criminal case. David's defense team faces a formidable challenge, explaining away a substantial body of financial evidence while addressing the devastating optics of their client being caught with a bag of cash while attempting to leave the country. One of the most compelling and persistent questions surrounding this scandal, the question members of his congregation ask most urgently, most painfully, is a deceptively simple one. Where exactly did the $272,000 actually go? David's travel records came under intense scrutiny. Investigators examined a pattern of frequent international journeys, including trips to the Middle East and Europe, asking hard questions about who paid for those trips and what purpose they served. Investigators examined David's personal bank accounts in detail, looking for unusual deposits, withdrawals, and transfers that might explain where the allegedly stolen funds ended up. Questions remain about whether money was moved to accounts outside the United States.
What investigators revealed publicly paints a picture of a lifestyle significantly more lavish than one might expect from a man who had taken vows of religious service and simplicity.
The discovery of both US dollars and European euros in his airport luggage was particularly telling, suggesting a degree of financial preparation for international travel that goes well beyond what any bishop's legitimate salary and expenses would explain.
For the ordinary parishioners, the Gensi person, they did prayers, and they gave trust. Their bishop would honor that trust.
As if the financial crimes were not already shocking enough, the Bishop David scandal took an even more explosive and deeply personal turn when a second set of unclear accounts were cut.
A private investigator, speaking to a prominent Catholic investigative news publication, came forward with a claim that he had personally observed Bishop David's vehicle parked outside a well-known adult entertainment establishment in Tijuana, Mexico. The investigator stated that while David was observed in the vicinity of the establishment, he was not directly seen entering the building itself, a crucial distinction that has not prevented the allegation from spreading rapidly and widely. In the court of public opinion, the image of a sitting Catholic bishop's car parked outside a brothel across the border proved impossible to ignore, regardless of the legal limitations of the evidence.
For members of the Chaldean Catholic community, many from deeply conservative cultural backgrounds, this allegation struck a wound that ran far deeper than annual crime.
These allegations have not been included in the formal criminal charges and they remain unproven. Nevertheless, they have become an inseparable part of the public narrative, deepening the sense of moral devastation felt by the community he allegedly betrayed. When the news of Bishop David's arrest broke publicly, the reaction within the Chaldean Catholic community of San Diego was immediate, visceral, and deeply human.
For a people who had survived genocide, displacement, and the destruction of their ancient homeland, the church had always been the one unshakable constant.
Community members described a dizzying mixture of emotions: grief for what they heard at the alleged betrayal, confusion at how it went undetected for so long, and deep sadness for what this meant for the future of their beloved church.
Many struggled to reconcile the Bishop David they thought they knew. The Master Vigils now faced 17 felony charges in a San Diego courtroom.
Community leaders and prominent members of the Chaldean diaspora across the United States, Canada, Australia, and Europe spoke out publicly, calling for full transparency, complete accountability, and a thorough investigation of everything that had gone wrong.
And yet, even in the midst of all this pain, something remarkable was also visible, and who refused to let one man's alleged crimes destroy what they had built together.
As the scandal erupted publicly and criminal charges were formally announced, the eyes of the global Catholic Church turned toward Rome, and for once, the Vatican responded with a speed and decisiveness that surprised many observers. Pope Leo XIV, who had ascended to the papacy following the passing of Pope Francis, formally accepted Bishop David's resignation on March 10, 2026, just days after the airport arrest had made international headlines worldwide. The resignation had reportedly been submitted weeks earlier in February, suggesting church leadership in Rome had already been made fully aware of the serious allegations against David before his dramatic arrest at the airport. The Vatican's swift and public acceptance of the resignation sent an unmistakably clear message:
The Holy See had absolutely no intention of standing behind a bishop facing charges of this gravity.
Reports emerged that Cardinal Raphael Sacco, one of the most senior figures in the Chaldean Catholic Church, had also come under Vatican scrutiny, allegedly having deliberately delayed the appointment of a replacement for Bishop David. For many observers, the Vatican's response represented a rare and genuinely encouraging example of the Catholic Church choosing decisive action over quiet manner, a signal that this institution was capable of holding itself accountable when the weight of evidence demanded it.
The legal process will take its course. A verdict will eventually be delivered. But for the thousands of Chaldean Catholic families of San Diego, the people who gave faith their trust,
behind the sacred robes, behind the gold cross, behind 17 years of baptisms, blessings, and Sunday sermons, there was a man.
This community survived genocide. They survived displacement. They survived the destruction of their ancient homeland. They crossed oceans and rebuilt everything from nothing.